All right, well, let's call the meeting to order at 3:06. Can I get a roll call, please?
Director Espinoza. Director Hogue.
Here.
Director Toyota. Director McDaniel.
Present.
Director Sandra.
Present.
Director Nagy.
Present.
Director Nelson.
Here.
Director Pereira. Director Pedrosa.
Here.
Director Silvera.
Present.
Chair Yones.
Present, and we have a quorum. Can move on to the invocation. Any volunteers? Going once. Thanks. Okay. Move on to the pledge. Vice Chair. No, I had April do it last time, so I kind of feel bad. So I'm going to ask Vice Chair Silvera if you want to lead us.
Please join me to the flag of the greatest country in the world. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're gonna get all tangled up.
I know.
Just gonna.
Move on to item 2, approval of the agenda. And just FYI, we have request by staff to remove item on the consent agenda, item 6A9.
Move to approve. Do we have to roll call vote? Since Emily's not here, can we blame her for a roll call vote, or we can still vote with them?
You don't have to do a roll call vote because of me. You, as long as we're all there in person, no roll call vote is needed.
Okay. We have a motion. I see Director Serrato sneaking in. Can we have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Can you note that on the record that the mayor has arrived?
The mayor is here.
At 3:08.
Yes. All right.
He's got a little spring in his step there.
All the cool people are here. All right. Item 3, public comment. Public comments available in advance during the meeting. We have anyone public comment in person or online? Okay. I will close public comment and move on to item 4, reports and presentations. And I'll turn it over to Vice Chair Silvera.
We'll start with Director Paul Yanez, in appreciation of your dedication and service on the MCAG Governing Board and for your leadership as chairperson, December of 22 to November of 22. Congratulations on behalf of the rest of the board. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Whatever. No, I honestly just want to say really quick, just that you guys have been a joy to work with. You know, I had some reservations only because of my city, but that's okay. You know, I really enjoyed everything, and I knew that my time in politics was short, but it was a great experience. And so thank you, everybody, for just, you know, not labeling me the Los Banos guy and getting to know me, so I appreciate it.
So I will say to that, as somebody who worked with your predecessors, you were a much welcome surprise of somebody who really kind of looked at your position on this board as you're representing your city, but you're also part of an organization that represents the whole county, and you did a great job of really putting your work with it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Ditto.
Next up, we have Director April Hogue, in appreciation of your years of service on the MCAG Governing Board from December of 2016 to November of 2024. We're going to get some pictures, so congratulations, April. Would like to say a few words?
I expect to see that at the coffee bar.
Yes. I just want to say thank you for having me on your board and all these years of working together. I think Dos Palace has really benefited from your organization, and I just appreciate you guys thinking of Dos Palace when you come up with creative ways to come up with some funding. And I think that we've made an impact in Dos Palace because of what we do here. So I appreciate it. And I learned a lot. It's been a good experience for me. So thank you.
though he is not here, I still will announce that this would have been Director Rodrigo Espinosa's last meeting in appreciation of his years of service on the MCAG governing board from September of 2010 to December of 2024, and so we'll make sure that Supervisor Espinosa gets.
All right, moving on to 4B, Caltrans District 10 report.
I know, she really is. Do we have Caltrans on? I wonder if they're at the county.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Just over there checking for him, I didn't see him.
Checking out our construction.
No.
Then no.
Okay, okay. I'll keep an eye to see if anybody texts, but
We'll circle back if needed. Item 5 is information items. These items are included for informational purposes. No presentation will be made by staff unless board members have questions. On from item 5. And the consent calendar, item 6, and just a reminder, we did pull item 6A9. We have a motion with a consent calendar.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right, move on to item 7. Action items for MCAG. Action items considered separately by the board. 7A, authorized contract for Transportation Development Act audits in the amount of $280,000 with Price Page and Company. And for this, we'll go now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I get started, April, it was a pleasure. You're one of my favorite board members, and always a delight. Always had our agencies back, and thank you. So to soften the blow, this item is to authorize the executive director to enter the contract for TDA audit services not to exceed $280,000. TDA requires that any agency that receives local transportation funds, as we know as LTF, must undergo an audit mandated by the TDA law. It has come to our attention that the jurisdictions have not conducted these audits as a requirement by TDA standards. This contract aims to bring all jurisdictions up to date to ensure the compliance which is necessary for them to continue receiving TDA funds. The last time any jurisdiction did any, when they started receiving TDA funds was like 16, 17. And before that, it was going to either transit or the planning agency. So this is to get all the agencies up to date. Until these funds are until these audits are completed, the authority cannot release any funds to a jurisdiction. The goal is to get these audits completed by June of 2025. So, any questions?
Questions from the board? No. Have a motion.
I'll move.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Item 8, discussion items. Items to be presented separately in order to allow board members to ask questions. Move to 8A, draft regional growth forecast 2050. For this, we're going to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. MCAG is working with consultant PRB to develop a regional growth forecast through the year 2050. We update regional growth forecasts every 4 years, and then the results are used as inputs into our travel demand model. And as you're likely aware, our travel demand model is used to inform some important planning efforts, such as the RTP-SCS, corridor studies, and vehicle miles traveled for environmental analysis. We're here today to present you the draft forecast. Local jurisdiction staff provided some data to inform the growth forecast update, and also reviewed a preliminary draft. And then we're looking to receive any additional comments by close of business on November 21st, which is a week from today. And we anticipate bringing the final growth forecast back to the governing board in December for adoption. And then after it's adopted, we will integrate it into our travel demand model update, which is also currently underway. And we will be using that updated model to develop our 2026 RTP-SCS, which will be kicking off early next year. A little bit of a domino effect. So Beth Draws from PRB is online today. She is the lead on the consultant side, and she's going to give a short presentation about the process and the results of the draft forecast. And each should have a hard copy of the presentation, but if you don't have one, just raise your hand and I'll bring one to you. But with that, I will hand it over to Beth.
Thank you, Meg. Let's see. Can you let me know if you can see the slides?
You can, yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me here today. I have the pleasure of describing the preliminary draft growth forecast to you. And what we'll do today is cover background and purpose of the forecast, which Meg gave you a high-level overview, and then spend some time reviewing trends in demographics, housing, and jobs that are relevant for the region and reflective of state, national, and global trends. Talk a bit about the forecast process. I'm going to do a high-level overview. There's more specific technical detail in your agenda packet on methods. Share a little bit of places where we got local expert insights and local input, and then present the preliminary draft forecast, and then, of course, open it up for discussion. So as Meg mentioned, the purpose of the forecast is really to support the transportation plan. We're doing a forecast for Merced County and jurisdictions. You'll sometimes hear me say jurisdictions instead of cities and the county because that can be kind of long. But really it's all of the cities and the unincorporated area for population, housing, jobs, and then demographic and socioeconomic characteristics that are important for understanding travel patterns. It's a key input to the regional plan, both the regional transportation plan and the sustainable communities strategy. Our base year for this forecast is 2020, and the horizon year goes out to 2050. But as you know, it's almost the end of 2024. And so I just wanted to share that we have incorporated current data through January of 2024 wherever we have that available. And just a little bit of background and framing, because this comes up often as a question. How does this relate to general plans and the regional housing needs allocation? And I want to share that the forecast is our best guess at growth between 2020 and 2050. Clearly, general plans provide an important blueprint, but general plans are intended to be a build-out projection, and some of them may be current and some of them may be older. And so our purpose with this forecast is what growth we anticipate is going to happen in the region and in each of the jurisdictions between now and 2050. And there's also linkages or sort of relationships with the regional housing needs allocation process, or RHNA, but they're also not the same. You all know RHNA is an assessment of and plan for addressing 8 years of housing need. And of course, the forecast is how much growth we anticipate is going to happen. There are some places where the two have interconnections. So for example, in state statute, it says that the regional plan shall accommodate the current RHNA. So in this case, the 6-cycle RHNA within the plan. So we read that as by 2050, the region will build that many houses. And so I can tell you right now, in this forecast, we do anticipate that many houses will be built, but we're not saying that every city is going to build its 8-year RHNA by that 8-year time point. So different horizons, different purposes, of course, across those two different planning documents. So how do we develop a forecast? We start with the region first. We use highly respected models. The specific details of those are in your document or are in your agenda packet. We use a lot of high quality data and then opportunities for local input. And so at the start of this process, we begin data collection. We're looking at data from a variety of federal, state, and local data sources that are current and well respected. We also conduct an expert survey where we reach out to people from around the county who have expertise in housing or in water or in agriculture to ask for their insights as to how they expect the region's going to grow and change. And then we begin model testing, where we're starting to put the data in and see how the model's performing. And we use that to produce a preliminary regional growth forecast. So this is, again, at that county level, so for Merced as a whole. And then we reach out to each of the jurisdictions to ask for local context information. In particular, we want the early years of the forecast to reflect what we know is underway. So if a city has a subdivision that's under construction today, we want to make sure that those units are reflected in the early years of the forecast. Maybe in the unincorporated area, there is a new warehouse facility that's under construction. We want to make sure those jobs are represented in the early years of the forecast. And so we reached out to each of the cities and the county to gather that information about projects that are either under construction or in the development pipeline. We then take that information along with the regional and the historic trend data, and we put that into our sub-regional model, and we begin running it and testing it. and produce a preliminary subregional forecast. So this is where we've got the city and the unincorporated area detail. And we sent that out for local review. So each of the cities has had an opportunity to review their city results and to provide feedback. So for example, if in that first pass of collecting local data, we maybe missed or didn't get information about some housing development that was under construction, that's an opportunity to share that so that we can make sure that it gets into the final forecast. We produce a revised subregional forecast, and that is being shared with you today. And then we have this final opportunity for local review and input. Any feedback that we receive by next week will go into the, we will incorporate into a final forecast that will be brought to you in December. I mentioned that the forecast is based on a lot of data, and just to give you a sense of the kinds of data sources we're looking at, the data that inform this model are from places like the US Census Bureau, so the 2020 census, the American Community Survey, local employer and household dynamics database, state data sources like the California Employment Development Department and Department of Finance, and then of course lots of opportunities for local context. So we start out with that regional expert survey. And we work with each of the jurisdictions to get their building permit or development pipeline information, and then information about opportunities for or barriers to development, and then multiple rounds of review and comment on the drafts. And then, of course, probably what I find the most interesting piece of all of this is sort of that what trends are influencing the forecast. And you may all know that population growth locally, statewide, nationally has been slowing down. A big piece of that, as the image on the screen kind of suggests, is declining birth rates. And so I want to share a little bit of that background context with you today. So the first slide we're going to look at is the annual percent change in population. So the change in population from one year to the next, going all the way back to 1990. And the color scheme you see on the slide here is going to persist throughout the presentation, where that thick blue line is MCAG, the gold is the state of California, and the gray is the US trend. And although you see some years really high growth and some years there's really low growth, there's sort of this long-term trend that you also see in the chart, where when you look at the left-hand side closer to the 90s, growth rates are generally higher. And when you look closer to today, growth rates are generally lower. So the rate of growth statewide, nationally, and locally has been falling over time. A big piece of that is because of the age structure. So what you see on the slide here is what we demographers refer to as a population pyramid. It's kind of a neat tool for presenting a lot of information about population all at once. So what this one shows is the population age structure for the United States, with males on the left-hand side of the chart and females on the right-hand side of the chart, youngest ages at the bottom and oldest ages at the top. So that if we read this bottom left rectangle, this is boys under the age of 5 in 2020. And if we read the top rightmost sliver here, this is women ages 100 and older in 2020. And there's one more piece of information I've added to this chart, and it's those grays. The gray represents the population in the US in 2000. And the blue represents the population in the US in 2020. And where the blue lines extend farther than the gray, that's where population growth has happened. If the gray lines extend farther, that's because population has gotten smaller in those age groups. And so you really see over that 2 decades that almost all of the growth in population in the United States is in ages 50 and older. And that's where we see that blue line extending out beyond the gray. A little bit in working ages, but the vast majority of growth is in those older ages. And in fact, basically no growth in the child population over that period. When we look at the state of California, here we're only looking back to 2010, but you have that same pattern where we see in California, almost all of the population growth has been in the population ages 55 and older. And in fact, we saw the population under age 5 start to shrink. So we're seeing the child population get smaller from one decade to the next statewide. And then the MCAG region is younger than the state on average. This is in large part because there's a fairly large university here. And so you do see a difference in the population age structure with more people in their, late teens and early 20s than we do statewide and nationally, or bigger proportion. But again, we still see that most of the growth is in those older ages, and the child population is starting to shrink. And so what this suggests to us is that as this group of children, 20 years from now, this group of children are going to be entering young adulthood, maybe starting families. There will be fewer of them to have children 20 years from now than there are today. And so that starts to suggest that regardless of what else happens, the population is likely to grow much more slowly, or perhaps at some point in our lifetime start to shrink.
Beth?
Yes.
This is Stacy. We have a question here. Can we,
Sure.
Is it okay if we take a minute?
I
Okay.
would love that. Absolutely.
Okay.
Go back to the US population.
Sure.
And let me know if you have any trouble hearing, and I can translate.
So far I can hear, but thank you. Yes, so far I can hear.
Okay. Can you explain that again? So the gray is the 2020 and the blue, or I'm sorry, the 2000 and 2020 is what it is now? So like
Yes.
the difference is?
Yes.
Okay, and that's the same for all of them, correct?
Yes. Yeah. The hollow line is the hollow line is the more recent data for all of them. So on this chart, the gray is 2000. So 20 years, well, 24 years ago, but is 2000. And the hollow line is the 2020 census. And so where we see this hollow line extending out beyond the gray, that means that the population grew. And really see a huge change. This is sort of the baby boom moving up into their 60s in the 2020 time period, where they would have been in their 40s to 60s 2 decades before. And if we look at California, those solid lines, so the older data, the 2010 data, extend out beyond where we were in 2020 for some of the prime working ages, so in the people in their 40s, for example. And we see that the population has really grown. So this hollow area is much farther out than the color area for people ages 55 and older in the state.
Got it. Thank you.
And then when we look at more, yeah, happy to. And please, this is for your knowledge. Please feel free to ask questions as we go. I'd be happy to answer them. So similar, we've got in Merced, yes, there's been growth in the university and young adult population, but again, much of the growth is older, and we have a declining child population. And a large part of that is because birth rates have fallen. And we're looking here just at the number of births, but birth rates have been falling pretty steadily, mostly for people in their teens and 20s. But what we see is that really long-term trend of since the mid-2000s, the number of births in Merced, with a few minor exceptions, have been coming down pretty steadily over that period of time. And this reflects local trends, it reflects state trends. We're seeing this pattern globally, so there's not a reason to think that this trend is going to change anytime soon. The other piece of that puzzle is what's going on in terms of life expectancy. And so what we saw even pre-pandemic is that death rates were starting to rise. So obviously we know that the number of deaths increased pretty dramatically in 2020 and 2021. That's that blip you see at the end of the chart here. But if you look further back, you see that those rates were starting to creep up even before that. And this reflects, there's a whole variety of factors at play here, access to high quality healthcare, overdose mortality, there's a bunch that's going on here, but we really had sort of entered a period of flat improvements in life expectancy even before the pandemic started. And then when we look today, that what we see, what this chart shows is the number of deaths per month in California. And I've got some pre-pandemic years and some pandemic and current years on here. So the gray lines represent the number of deaths per month in 2018 and 2019. And then the orangey colors, the lighter colors are older years, the brighter, darker colors are the most current. And so you really see the effect of the pandemic here at the end of 2020 and at the beginning of 2021, where we see a much higher number of deaths per month in that winter. And then when we look to 2022, we see that it continues to be elevated above what our historic averages were. And I think many people were hoping that by the time we got to 2023 and 2024, we'd be back to sort of normal and baseline. But what we see is that even in 23 and 24, the number of deaths per month statewide have remained elevated. And we see this in mortality rates across all groups, that we lost ground during the pandemic, and it seems to have settled at a new higher level. So we don't expect, this forecast doesn't include an expectation of rapid improvement in life expectancy. The last piece of the puzzle for population change, of course, is migration. And there's two very different stories on the chart here. So international migration is that blue line. You can see it's really pretty stable over time. About 1,000 people on balance, between 800 to 1,000 people on balance, move into the county pretty much every year. Some move out, some move in, with a net change of about, between 500 and 1,000 people. Domestic migration, so this is people moving into or out of the region from other parts of the United States, kind of roller coaster here. Some years, really huge increases, some years, really large outflows. And so this part of the pattern can be very volatile. What we're looking for in the forecast is sort of what long-term trend we expect. And so in the long term, we expect net international migration to return to its historic average. And domestic migration, we have modeled this wild ride based on things like job opportunities and housing availability. So we expect a slow return to sort of net zero or a slight increase in net domestic migration in this forecast. And then, of course, I mentioned part of that net migration is expectations of job growth. And so Merced has had strong job growth. Even when the region was losing population during the pandemic, job growth rebounded very quickly and has continued growing. So we expect that to continue to be strong.
Beth, we have a question here.
Sure.
From Director McDaniel.
So my question is, so I sit on the workforce development, and I know our jobless rate is still higher. Are you saying these are more jobs being offered within the county, or is this employed people?
This is the the number of jobs. So this might be one person having two jobs, might be counted twice. Anyone with a job who lives or who works in the county is counted here. So this is not necessarily suggesting that the unemployment rate is coming down, although we do expect that over time in the forecast, but just that this is the net number
More jobs
of
being filled.
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
perfect.
Yep.
Thanks.
And then last piece of the puzzle clearly is housing. I suspect this is a topic on everyone's minds. When we look at housing over time, housing changes boom and bust. They'll see that there are some years where there's very rapid increase in housing in the region, and other years where there's very little, particularly in the wake of the Great Recession, very slow changes in housing, but has rebounded in recent years. And when we look at that compared to population, so this is showing the change in population in blue, the change in housing in green. There are some years where population growth is slowing down, but housing is growing very rapidly. Some years where population growth is pretty stable, but housing sort of dips to almost no change. And then more recently during the pandemic, we actually had a year where there was some population loss, but yet housing continued to be fairly strong. And so these two can move in very different directions. And this is probably one of the changes that's the biggest shift in the region, is that we actually expect housing to continue growing faster than population throughout most of this forecast. A big reason for that is that, one, there's existing unmet need, but also as a population ages, it needs more housing. So if you think about someone who's 18 years old or 20 years old, may still be living with their family or probably living with roommates. They are not likely to be head of household. So you see that on the leftmost side of the screen there. Very low what we call household formation rates for people in their teens and early 20s. And as people move through their lives, they might move out of a family home, might give up living with roommates, might start a family of their own. And so as people move through the age course or move through the life course, their demand for housing rises. They're more likely to have a house of their own. And it peaks in older adulthood. And so one of the things that this chart signals to us is that even if the county's population stayed exactly the same size, if the population ages, there will be more demand for housing in the future as more and more people live alone. And as we're looking at this forecast, where the population sort of shrinking is coming from is in children and people in their young adult ages. So they're changing, they're not going to, a 14-year-old doesn't own their own house or doesn't rent their own house. A 10-year-old doesn't rent their own house. Most of the growth is going to be in these older ages where people are often living alone. And so as that age structure shifts, the rate of change in housing or the demand for housing is going to change faster than the rate of change in population. One of the other things that we have seen in recent years is that the vacancy rate, and there's a couple of ways to think about the vacancy rate. This is just the total number of units that are vacant for any reason. So it might be a short-term rental, it might be a second home, it might be available for rent. All of those units divided by the total stock. We've seen those numbers come way down in recent years, but then also more housing being constructed. So we do expect that that rate will start to come back up to historic averages over the course of the forecast. And then the other piece, it's a very subtle shift on this chart, but you can see average household size is starting to come down, and we expect that to come down more as the population ages and more people are living alone. And of course, that's all sort of the historical information that's informing the forecast. We also asked experts for their perspective on the region. We invited 13 participants representing local and statewide expertise. So people like representatives from the Farm Bureau, water agencies, real estate and housing groups, chambers of commerce, so very wide net in terms of local perspective. We got 8 respondents who provided both qualitative and quantitative responses on their outlook for the region. And I'm just going to do the highest level summary here. In general, pretty strong optimism for faster than the historical rate job growth and population growth. It would be a little bit hard to grow less than historical population growth, given that it's been a little slow lately. So these weren't surprising. And then kind of an expectation of not a whole lot of change in household growth in this forecast. And then one last piece of that expert puzzle is that we also look to peer organizations. So for example, the Census Bureau produces projections for the US population, Department of Finance produces projections for the state population. So we look at those. And the left-hand side of the chart is historic rates of change. The right-hand side of the chart from about 2022 on is projections. And what we see here is that all of them are projecting a decrease in the rate of growth in terms of population. So all of this is kind of going into the context for what we came up with for this preliminary draft forecast. We do the forecast more than one way. Because of course, if you ask me to tell you what your region is going to look like tomorrow, it's going to look an awful lot like it does today, barring some sort of major catastrophe. And so predicting tomorrow is easy. Predicting a year from now, pretty easy, a little bit harder. Predicting 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that band of uncertainty gets wider and wider the farther we go out from today. And so one of the things we do as part of any of our forecasts is compare to a variety of alternative methods, like what's the fastest rate of growth we could expect? What's the slowest? And then also, what do our peer organizations have for their forecast? And so there's a lot more information about this in your packet, but what I want to highlight here is that in terms of the high trend and the low trend, our lowest forecast was a jobs ratio based on Caltrans's jobs forecast. This really tells me Caltrans's jobs forecast is probably pessimistic. If we look at the next lowest, Department of Finance's most recent forecast is our next lowest. And the preliminary draft forecast we have for the region is kind of in the middle. And this is where we want to be to have a plausible forecast. If we were very close to the high trend, I would be thinking that perhaps this draft was too optimistic. If we were very close, if we were below DOF or close to the job ratio forecast, and everyone else was up here, I would be thinking the forecast was too pessimistic. Being in the middle of that range gives you some credibility that this is a reasonable forecast because it's within the bounds of what alternative methods and peer organizations are producing as their forecast for the region. And then as we look to the individual components, we expect that population growth continues growing, but will slow slightly. Job growth, and we're going through a period of rebound right now. That growth will eventually slow and be closer to the rate of population growth. And then housing growth, we have seen it grow faster, and we expect it to continue growing faster than population growth throughout the forecast for the reasons I mentioned. Unwinding current tight vacancy rates, more people who are older adults and living alone will kind of change that housing market dynamic. And then one last chart just sort of showing all the total numbers of those is a different way of looking at them. And then putting it in perspective, bringing back that national and California perspective, we do expect that the Merced region will continue to grow faster than the state and nation. But again, with that rate, the rate of growth will be slowing over time, kind of like what we expect to see statewide and nationally. And then last, but certainly not least, we have the information for each of the cities. This table is on page 181 of your packet, I believe, and then more detail, a detailed profile for each city starts on, I think it's either page 183 or 84. And so with that, I will stop sharing and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you. Great presentation. A lot of information. So how often do you reevaluate this, right? So you have these projections that are putting it out to 2050. What's the standard on when do you check and see how close you are? And then at that point, do you kind of reevaluate and add more years to it, or just reevaluate the years that are left to the 2050 mark?
So it's a really great question. So the way that this process works is every 4 years, MCAG will come back and do a new forecast that goes and redoes everything. So brings it up to the most current base data, the most current input data, and projects through at least 25 years. So I think the next one will probably go out to 2055 or 2060. But it's every 4 years, the region is coming back and checking and updating the models to do a new forecast to support the plan.
And then ultimately, and pardon my ignorance, but what are we doing this for? What is the stick and the carrot on this thing? Why are we doing it, and what does it help us?
So the state provides population projections at the county level, but we need, for our local purposes, we need them at the jurisdiction level, and even for the transportation, smaller zones for our regional transportation plan, sustainable community strategy. But the results of this are going to go into our travel demand model, and that's used for a lot of important planning efforts like the RTP-SDS and for BMT analysis and for other studies as well.
And then we get this information for our use, and then we use it in this modeling. But do we share this with the state? Do they say, well, you guys did this, now this is our new model that we look at, or do they still come up with their own and tell us what they're going to do?
That's a good, there's an excellent question. It would be nice if they would just take the local model. No, but full disclosure, I am in close discussions with the demography team at the state. And so they run their own model, but we frequently share information about expectations for the regions that we're working on. And so it's kind of a back and forth. They share information about what they're seeing. I share information for the regions I work on about what I'm seeing. They are independent models, but we work closely together.
And then my last question, if you go back a few slides when you talk about the stakeholders, that number you reached out to 13 and you got 8. How much value do you put on that? Because 8 seems like a pretty small number to me.
I would agree. As a demographer and a survey person, declining survey participation has been a challenge across the board, whether it's our local surveys that we're doing for work like this or national surveys like the Current Population Survey, American Community Survey, people are just less likely to respond to things. But what we know is that the people who responded understand the region very well. So it was, some people from the Farm Bureau, from chambers of commerce, representing housing and real estate organizations locally. And so when we read through the qualitative feedback, things like comments that they put in about how they expect the region to change, what things that they see could promote or be a drag on growth, that context is really key. And we know that the people we were asking are experts locally, so that their feedback carries that sort of expertise that they have. So yeah, not a high response rate, but we know that the people who responded have that deep local expertise.
And one other nuance with the feedback between the state. So every other RTP cycle coincides with the RENA cycle. So this update of the RTP does not coincide with the RENA update. So that our next RENA update will be in 2030. And we have the potential to use our local regional growth forecast for RENA. I don't think that HCD typically, but there are some requirements around in 2030 when we do this update that it has to be within like 1.5% of DOF. Otherwise, we can't use it for RENA.
And that just goes to show you the state's still going to do they're going to do what they want to do, and they're going to be what they want them to be in order to, speak their narrative, if you will. And at least I'm confident that we got real numbers because we got good people working on it that want to do the right thing. So thank you.
Any other questions, Director Nagy?
Thank you, Chair. Great presentation. This thing was thought-provoking to read. I do have a couple of items for clarification. It seemed like, we're always saying we're an ag community, but ag isn't our biggest employers in all the cities and the unincorporated. It's education and health by far, by a wide margin. And I kind of find it interesting that in the verbiage, population is going to shrink, but yet our education is still going to be expanding. And could you address how, it would seem like if there's less children being born, there's going to be less people in schools and.
They're going to have smaller classroom sizes.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And there is a city or two where ag is bigger than education and health, but I think there's a piece, and maybe the next time we present this, we can split the education and health data out separately because they do go in different directions. Most of the growth you see in that sector in the forecast is healthcare. As the population ages, we'll need more and more healthcare and healthcare related services. So it's that part of it that's growing, and education's pretty flat in the forecast.
Thank you, because that's kind of what I was thinking, because it's got to be all of us old parts, so.
Myself included.
But it's interesting,
Yeah.
I would like to see that split up because, we split up hotel workers and there's only like less than 100 mostly in most cities, so thank you.
Any other questions?
How did you apportion growth between the various jurisdictions? I see most of it you forecast within the city of Merced, essentially all of it within the cities of Merced and Los Banos. How do you?
That's a great question. We didn't spend a lot of time digging into the model specifics. So the regional model we talked about, where all those numbers come from, at the jurisdiction level, what we're looking at are a couple of things. We're looking at past growth rate trends, so which jurisdictions have grown the most, and the development pipeline. So who's got projects under construction, projects that are entitled, areas that are planned for fairly large development. We asked all of the cities and the unincorporated or the county for that information. And that's where that growth number comes from. The other thing that's going on with the city of Merced is that the university has now been annexed into the city. And so any growth at the university is occurring in the city of Merced and changing their growth rate as well. So it's all of those pieces. But the preliminary numbers start out with the historic trends, and then we adjust those based on where development is happening and where development is planned for in each of the cities.
Got it. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Sorry, I got one more question. Do politics play into any of this? Like as in, you know, I mean, different administrations, I mean, in California, we've been left for a long time, but nationally, just a recent election, does that play into anything, any of like your decision-making or any of the thought process that goes in this? Because I think you could probably go back and look at some of the historical stuff that'll show you up and down, and you could track that back to administrations.
Yes. And I would say we talked about this a little bit. And I think we're in one of those situations where it's probably too early to tell. So we did this forecast before the election. Full disclosure, needed to get the board packet out. The international migration, I think, is a question. We know that there are some plans to change federal immigration policy, and that could change the international migration piece of this forecast. International migration is not a huge piece of population change in the region, so I don't know that it would lead to a sea change in terms of the county-wide total population. But that number could get quite a bit lower than what we have. We did take into account what happened, you know, over the last several administrations and how that number has gone up and down. That's all in there. But that is a piece where depending on what happens next year, that might be the kind of assumption we'd want to revisit and say, okay, well, does this number need to go down a little bit or maybe up, you know, depending on the politics? Does it need to go in a different direction than what we assumed in this forecast?
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right. Thank you.
I do actually.
Go ahead.
Just a notation, in the last census that we did, we had to do our redistricting for the whole county.
Mm-hmm.
What we did notice, and I don't see it indicated here, but the west side was at a 16% increase over the rest of the county. I know the Atwater area was basically in line with the projected growth, but I just noticed that Los Banos was a lot higher, I guess maybe because of the influence of Santa Clara County coming in. But I don't see it reflected in here. It shows Merced at the same amount, whereas through the census, we saw that was much different.
It's the same amount you mean in terms of like share growth rate over
Percent
time?
of growth.
Percent, okay. So the historical data, so for 2000, or listen to me, I've been doing this job for a long time. For 2020, all of the data from 2020 to 2024 is actual. So this is the counts from the Census Bureau and from the Department of Finance for those years. The projections are, again, looking at sort of the long-term historic growth trends and the development pipeline. So if you're thinking maybe Atwater could be growing faster than what we're showing here, for example.
No, I think it was steady.
Okay.
I think the west side was actually growing faster than what's being indicated here.
Can I just clarify, Director McDaniel, is it that the census showed that the west side was 16% higher than what was projected historically? Was it comparing to past projections?
We were 11.5, and District 4 was 4.5% above the median, right? So we all grew, and part of District 4
was higher. Got it.
grew at a faster rate. So with our redistricting,
That's why our lines
Supervisor Pereira's district shrunk, my district shrunk in size because our population grew, and then 2 or 3 was about the same, and then 1 and 2, their districts grew in order to compensate to get to that. Yeah.
All right, we would have to go back and look at some of the historical data, but maybe we can investigate and report back next time.
Perfect.
All right, anyone else? Well, I'm a glass half full person, so what I really took away from this is less crying kids in the movie theaters and restaurants, and I need to invest in real estate as I get older. My parents have.
Yes.
I'm a glass half full guy, so, without anything else? No, just a discussion item as well, right? All right. Move on to, thank you so much. Move on to item 9, action items to be considered separately by the board. Public comment will be available during each item. So we'll move on to item 9A, adopt resolution number 2024-11-14-02, authorizing submission of CMAQ project request of $2 million for electric bus charging infrastructure installation. For this, we'll go to Serenity.
Good afternoon, directors. Thank you. As the title states, yes, TJPA has submitted a CMAQ application to assist with our infrastructure installation at our facility. And with this, part of that is we need to have board approval that we will be completing this project in a timely manner and have your approval to move forward with the submission. This project is not only in line with CMAQ's goals of improving air quality, but it also is in line with our state mandates to move to zero emissions by 2040. As you all know, we have 9 zero emission buses, battery electrics in our fleet right now, and we only have 1 charger. So we need to get some chargers installed. So this project includes the installation of 6 60 kilowatt and 13 150 kilowatt chargers. We already own some of the 150 kilowatt. We own 4 of them right now. We will be this includes the purchase of the remainder and along with the installation. The approval of this project is not a blanket approval. We will be coming back to the board every step of the way as we move forward with the project. We have been working already with our consultant Stantec on design and development, and we are in that process working with them and MID on the infrastructure already, and that's coming along pretty successfully, so we're looking forward to that. Total cost for the project is just a little over $9 million. We are requesting $2 million from the CMAQ projects that we hope to be awarded. We also have a little over $4.2 million of SB 125 set aside for this project. We'll be going after San Joaquin Valley air pollution to offset this, as well as hopefully dipping into our reserve as little as possible for this. Any questions on this?
Questions from directors?
Yeah, give me the numbers again. Write them down. The number of electric buses we have.
We currently have 9 in our fleet.
How many chargers?
Do we own or do we have installed that we're looking at for this project?
All 3.
We currently have 1 charger installed. It has dual dispensers, but we can only charge 1 bus at a time with it. We currently have in our possession 2 other chargers with 2 more on order. And then with this, just doing the math. With this, we will be purchasing an additional 7 150 kilowatt as well as 6 60 kilowatt chargers.
So 13 total.
Yes.
Those good mental math.
Yeah. I have some notes, but. So this is part of, you've seen some of this in our ICT plan that has come to you. This is what is phase 1 of our ICT plan, and we can send that back out as well for refresher.
And this includes like bringing the power in,
Yes.
installing the
Yeah,
concrete.
exactly. Yeah, the whole shebang. Yeah, purchase it and then the full installation.
So I'm just gonna say $9 million seems crazy. Right? And I don't know. So I've been telling you, my opinion is electric is the wrong way to go. Hydrogen fuel cell is the right way to go. And I know we've got to do some stuff internally. And $9 million on something that I think 20 years from now won't be used, right? I don't know, I just struggle with it.
Well, this is also, it's not just for, the 60 kilowatt chargers will be for transfer vehicles as well. So the cars that the drivers use to get from place to place. So it's kind of a dual purpose. Those probably won't be going to hydrogen anytime soon. And as you said, we also have, while we are looking at hydrogen for our larger transit vehicles, hydrogen for the smaller cutaway vehicles that we have isn't there yet. So we will have to continue with battery electric, or move to, and then continue the battery electric for those for the foreseeable future. Understand where you're coming from and not disagreeing, but yeah. Yep.
Present us, and they admit, right, that the buses aren't available, but they are going to be. And there was a H2B2, the company that built a hydrogen compressor between Kerman and Mendota. And they're pretty confident that over the next 3 years.
That'll be coming. Yeah. And again, this is a scaled down version of what our ICT plan includes. and it is just the phase one. Our ICT plan has 3 phases. Phase one was, it was 21 charger installations. Then phase 2 is the hydrogen, and phase 3 was additional chargers. So right now, we're just looking at a scaled down phase 1 to get us to where we need to be right now.
Director Silvera.
So, I heard you say there's gonna be 13 in total.
Yes, there is a typo, correct.
Why do we need so many?
Because we will be, again, we will have transfer vehicles that we're purchasing that will need to be zero emissions, as well as paratransit vehicles that we will be needing to purchase in the very near future that will be battery electric at this point.
Have we, I mean, this is probably off topic a little bit, have we figured out what our costs per mile that it costs, because the power doesn't come for free.
Correct.
What is our cost per mile to charge?
It's been difficult to figure out with only being able to charge one bus at a time, but we can get you some numbers.
So how long does it take?
Charge a bus, right now, 4 hours. Well, one bus takes 4 hours to charge.
And that's a 29-foot, 30-foot,
Yeah, right, 40 foot as well.
40? So,
So 4 hours.
Yeah.
So 24 hours to do.
That we're rotating.
Yeah, 4 of the buses are not operating.
yeah, I was gonna say,
Well, they can't.
3 of our 9, ZEBs are actually operating.
4 are operating, the remaining 5 will be going into operation as soon as we can figure out the charging
Are,
situation.
we also have found, though, that
On Monday, but Tuesday you gotta,
we went through these kind of temporary, I guess, charging, because of the long lead time that we had in our first buses coming. Also, while we, were developing our ICT plan, which is the Innovative Clean Transit Plan, that basically was to figure out what is the plan for us in terms of zero emission. It does recommend the hybrid, battery electric and, hydrogen. I don't think any of us disagree with Director Pereira. If I had, a crystal ball, it would be that the paratransit, the transfer vehicles, our microtransit programs, those cutaway style small buses will likely be, battery electric for a much longer period of time before some alternative source than battery, but really gearing up our facilities to be able to transition our larger buses, our commuter services, in the future, YARTs, all into hydrogen.
And the electric is coming from MID.
Correct.
That's the only savior.
Other questions? But any other questions from directors? No? All right, I know if council was sitting next to me, she'd be nudging me right now saying, open it up to the public, so don't worry. Emily, I remembered. Questions from the public? Do we have anybody online? He listen.
Thank you for
Nobody
making sure
online?
to do that, Director. I appreciate it.
We got all staff online.
Okay, all right, so, and no one in the public here, so, do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second it.
All right, all those in favor?
I,
Any opposition? One. All right, thank you. All right, moving on to, item 10, discussion items. On item 11, action items for Merced County Regional Waste, there are none. Item 12, discussion items. Facility Improvement Update 12A. For this, we'll go to James.
Good afternoon, Director, and members of the board. Just wanted to take a couple of minutes to give you a quick update on where we're at with our infrastructure phase 1 project out at the Highway 59 landfill. This has been really satisfying. Let's see, I forgot to turn it on. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to run through a couple of quick slides. The last, I'd say, 6 weeks out at the site have been kind of interesting because it's almost every other day something else is being put up. This is going to be our new fuel storage and dispensing station. You can see the bollards that are placed. This is basically on the south side. That'll be our regular gasoline and road diesel dispensing. The far north side of that will be our 12,000 gallon red dye diesel tank for our on-site equipment. The tanks are a long lead item. This is probably the slowest moving of the four main components, simply because once we got the building permit, then we had to get an air district permit. And of course, we got the new engineer that took him a little while to walk through it all. But we are moving forward with that. Here's a view from the east looking towards the west, or no, actually from the west looking east at what will be our eventual new household hazardous waste collection area. You can see the concrete cylinders there. Those are the supports for the canopy that will go over the top of that. So in the future, we'll have a road running right through there with a gate. Customers coming in with items that we're going to be collecting from them will just drive through the area. We'll have storage units on either side of the canopy for the different materials, paint, oil, grease, batteries, everything that's on our HHW list right now. I'll have a shot here in a minute of that concrete block building to the left there. That's going to be our storage building. We won't have hazardous waste stored in the building. It will be for our supplies, things like packing boxes, all of the miscellaneous items that we use for preparing the household hazardous waste to be shipped out. That'll have 4 roll-up doors on the exterior. We have 1 on the south side. And that building should be getting a roof on it within the next couple of weeks. Here's a quick view of the vehicle maintenance shop. All of these pictures were taken 2 days ago. The framework is all up for the vehicle maintenance shop. Within the next 3 or 4 days, they'll be moving over from the recycling building that we'll look at in a moment and start putting the outer skin on this building. You can kind of see, let's see if I can get on that. No, it won't work on the screen. Okay. There's 2 large roll-up doors there on the east side, 2 more on the west side for our heavy equipment that we'll be pulling through. This building will have an overhead crane in those 2 sets of doors. So we'll be able to use that for pulling transmissions and engines and whatnot out of the equipment. And this building here is our future recycling transfer station. You can kind of see a little bit there on the right-hand side. The outer skin has been put on the north wall of the building. As of this morning, they'd finished the whole west side, came across the south side, and they're getting ready to start enclosing the east side there. This building will have 4 roll-up doors on the east side, along with a door on the north and south side for the transfer trucks to pull straight through and be loaded out. So it's quite exciting to see the change from day to day. And with that, I'll entertain any questions.
I just wanted to add, you know, this project's been in discussion for many, many years. It's, I think, started back when the Valleyfield concept was developed, and the idea was that we needed to relocate some of the facilities that was the old scale house location and bring them over. And then we'd showed plans about kind of a one-stop shop for folks that are coming in. As you know, if you come to the 59 landfill now, and you need to take your cardboard, you're kind of winding around through the back, and you're winding over where the, like, you know, the stuff's concrete and everything, and it's an open air, 3-sided little wall that you throw your cardboard into. So all of those facilities are now going to be where you're used to seeing the admin building and the parking lot and that kind of just open expanse of that area. That will be where everything is. So it'll be I think a more user or visitor friendly experience. It'll also help contain so that your cardboard and everything isn't flying all the way around. It's really going to change the experience for the folks that are coming out to the landfill, and it's just really exciting to see it go because it's been in the works for a really, really long time. And then most importantly, I was going to make a joke, but it isn't really all that funny. The maintenance shop already has fewer holes in the walls, even looking like that, than the current one they're operating.
I will say, I had Chris Holm from Atwater came out this morning, and I gave him a quick tour of the site. We drove back there to the old site first, and he saw our old shop, and he said, "You've got to be kidding me." And I went, "No, that's why we need the new one."
Yep.
There are so many holes in the galvanized metal and the polyester shingles that were on the side of that building that it is not airtight by any means.
This means we've maximized its efficiency.
Oh, we did. And then still got another 10 years out.
Are we running into change orders?
We have, the original contract amount was about 8.9 million. So we had about $900,000 in contingency for change orders. We've used up about 60% of that. And a lot of that has been just due to the length of the project and the delays. We did see some cost increases for things like asphalt. You know, there's been some changes in electrical, trying to get all of the various pieces coordinated. We've still probably got, I think the last change order I saw, we've actually had several that were credits back to us, to the tune of about $140,000. So right now, we probably have about $400,000 left in that contingency. Talking with the contractor, we're pretty confident we've gotten past most of the high dollar ticket items. Anything else going forward should be fairly minor. So we're pretty confident we're gonna be able to finish off within the existing budget.
We track it really closely.
Any other questions?
More money to give, so make it work.
All right, thank you. All right, move on to item 13, Executive Director's Report.
Thank you. What?
Oh, boy. He said I didn't.
But- Well, then let me roll out my long list instead of the abbreviated one.
He's crossing stuff
I
off over
did,
here.
right? Okay. I do want to share that, it feels like it was last week, but just a couple days ago, I was, at the Focus on the Future conference, which was the annual meeting and conference of all the self-help counties in, California, and had the opportunity to sit on what they call the CEO roundtable, but just roundtable of executive directors. Had a chance to highlight some of our accomplishments. I mentioned both the Dos Palos Bridge project, as well as the Gustine Roundabout project as some of our measure-funded projects this year. Always a great opportunity to learn. I know that Nav and Elizabeth and I were taking notes of things that worked really well for our policy conference that's coming up in April, so that was really excellent. And I have to say kudos to the city. We flew to Hawthorne, and it was wonderful. And it's the one idea that Nav had that turned out to be excellent. So he convinced me.
A good idea.
He shook the pilot's hand when we landed and said, "Thank you for saving my job." Because I was very skeptical, not being I don't love to fly. It was a wonderful experience. It took us an hour and 18 minutes compared to 5.5 in the car. 20 minutes by car, then on to the Long Beach Convention Center. It was excellent. So
Thanks for rubbing that in. It was 4.5.
Oh, there you go. Yes, and thank you to the chair who participated. It's always a really good event. I want to update. I talked a bit over the last year and a half about the State Route 152 rescission from Highway 59 to the east side of Los Banos. I think it's like Santa Fe Canal, Santa Fe grade.
Yeah. They're
ready to come in. And the lay tip, I'd already said that the lay tip had been approved by the CTC, but they are on schedule to they're going to Caltrans will be phasing the properties, the parcels that will go to auction. And they're starting with, I think some of them are like around the Orchid Barn area, there's a couple there. But they're going to be scheduling, and I will let you know, and I told Josh the same, a live auction at the library in Los Banos. I'm waiting for the details. The first properties or parcels will be at auction this month. So when that happens, I'm sorry?
November?
Yes. They're listing the parcels available for auction this month. I don't know when the actual auction will be, but they'll start noticing those. So I'll make sure to keep our West Side folks aware of what's going on there. And then just as a reminder that all of the proceeds of the sale of those properties roll into the LATIP account that we got created by the CTC and will be preserved for future use by MCAG on the corridor. So that will take some time, but it stays here at least. I just want to mention we will be scheduling work with the TRB members that will have new board members to do some orientation before our January governing board meeting. A reminder, our open house is on the 19th. We are, again, unfortunately here for the December board meeting. then we will transition from a boardroom to an open house room fairly quickly, but it'll all happen right here. And then I also just want to say thank you. I know April, Director Hoag, I've lost count, but I know you have been on this board for a duration of time that you have seen it all with us and endured it all, the good and the bad. So, but just thank you. I know you've been an instrumental part of me being in this role, so it's been a pleasure. But yet I also know you aren't going far because I literally am in Dust Palace more than I probably should be, and you have got me with your cookies at the shop, so I will be back. And Director Yanez, it's a pleasure. I feel like we've worked together longer than 2 years. Has it just been 2 years? It feels like it, but I know too that our paths are going to cross again. So thank you for both of you for being just really great board members and contributing a lot and always answering my call, even though you know I'm a tough era. I appreciate it. And I will hopefully see Director Espinoza at some point. But I actually was preparing to present his next month because the county does not swear in new board members until January, until Raul pointed out that he'll probably be sworn in at Livingston in December.
I would say. He's getting close on the school board now too, though.
It's not,
The last update.
Well, then it's enough to say, to be determined, dun, 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 dot, dot, dot.
Compatible, you can do
Well, he might be.
The triple crown.
It never ends. The term that never ends. All right. So I think that is all for now, Mr. Chair. Yeah, no one's listening anymore.
All right, move on to item 14, director's reports. I'll start on this end here. Director McDaniel.
Nothing to report? Thank you.
Good. I just left the San Joaquin Valley Pollution Control District study session yesterday and today, and hydrogen fuel's the way to go.
You don't say.
Arch is already there.
To point two, when we went to the conference, but there's a lot of all that. Oh,
okay. Yep.
I just wanted to, congratulate those who ran this election cycle and won. Matt, was that one, Matt too? Apparently I don't get the news, so I don't know who won, who didn't win. I just know that I didn't win, because I didn't run. But I want to thank everybody for, helping me on this board, and through COVID, I was the chair, and it's just been a pleasure working with all of you, and I feel like we've made some good connections throughout the years, and it's been 8 years, and I think I've only missed 2 meetings. One time I had COVID, and I think one time I just couldn't get here. But I just want to thank everybody for all your support for these years, and don't forget Little Dos Palace. We still need funding, even if I'm not going to be here, so.
We still have coffee at your place, so.
Anyway, but congratulations to those who won their next election.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. It's been great working with you, Paul. You've been a great leader for us this year.
Thank you.
And you were always good. You always had good questions and good comments, and I'll miss you. I will.
Thank you.
April, it's been pretty good working with you. She only missed 2 meetings in all those years.
I did.
But she was only on time to 2 meetings. So poignant that she got a clock. That's all I have.
I just want to say, it's been fun serving with both of you. I know I didn't really know you before I got on this, and it's been, you definitely have a passion for Dos Palace, and Paul, same with you in Las Vegas. I thought Scotty only loved Las Vegas more and represented Las Vegas as hard as he does, but I see that you do the same thing from the city aspect of it, and I really appreciate when leaders step up and do that. So thank you both for this.
All right. I have nothing other than, again, thank you for kind of the relationships I've built the last 2 years. fortunate thing about me is now I get to go back to two really cool jobs. One's CEO and the other one's dad. So I'm good and happy to do both. And I will be spending the next 2 years, as the consultant for the California Department of Industrial Relations, doing that for the next 2 years, and my business is expanding to Honolulu. So that's what I'll be doing. So I'm not crying too much. So. But again, it's been an honor to work with all of you and the passion the staff has and everybody just to make this county better. So,
So he said you need a sales rep?
yeah, well, I'll convince them hydrogen's the way to go when I get there. So, yeah, so.
Depending on how closed session goes, you need a government affairs.
Yeah, right, so.
Yeah, that's me.
We'll, move into, a closed session, but we'll take a brief, adjourn recess before we go into closed session. Practicing? All right, we're back. All right, we're back from closed session, council.
Oh, yeah.
You want to report out or say?
Sorry, I just got it.
Yeah.
Have we had public comment? Sorry.
You did get me one last time. Do we have any public comment? I don't see anybody online. I know there's no one in person. No public comment.
Thank you, sorry.
Okay.
So direction was given to council regarding a contract for the executive director. The terms of that contract will be made available once it is finalized.
All right.
I believe, do we need to state the vote on the record?
Not until we.
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Adjourn the meeting at 5:29.